Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the Planned Parenthood Action Fund and the American Medical Student Association 101 webinar. First and foremost, thank you so much to the leadership of AMSA for having us. We're very excited at the potential and possibility of working with such dedicated and amazing folks, and really to help us all work together on what the plan is to protect and move access to women's health care forward. So thank you so much for providing us this opportunity. This webinar that you're going to see today is a pretty basic who is Planned Parenthood? What do we do? Where are we active? And what are some of the most vital ways that we need your voice and your help to continue to push back on the fight for open access for reproductive health care, access, and justice. So we're going to go ahead and launch into this. My name is Vanessa Gonzalez-Plumhoff. I am Director of Latino Leadership in Engagement and Interim Director of Strategic Partnerships. That is actually not me on the screen, although I would love for it to be. In my role as Director of Latino Leadership and Engagement, it is my job to make sure that everything that Planned Parenthood puts out is reflective of the communities that we serve, and that is highly Latino. I also work in partnership with my partner in crime, Angela Farrell-Zabala, who is the Director of African American Leadership and Engagement. And we have some amazing allies and coworkers here who really do help us highlight the impact of Planned Parenthood services, as well as the impact of those legislative attempts, congressional attempts to defund Planned Parenthood and the impact that it would have across communities across the country. So, as you should have seen in the startup to this, the reproductive health in America continues to be under a constant barrage of attacks, including violent attacks against those who provide services. In the wake of a deadly attack at a Planned Parenthood health center in Colorado Springs, coupled with the ongoing violence felt by those in the communities most in need of these services, it is imperative that those who advocate and work in reproductive health join together to strengthen the movement and access to care. Today you're going to hear how all of these things come together, including what the lay of the land is when it comes to when it comes to reproductive health across the country. What are the legislative efforts in the states? What are some of the key points in movement building that Planned Parenthood is helping and in some cases leading in these states? And how does this all increase access to care? You're also going to be hearing today from a wonderful member of our comms team who's going to tell to you about how we can amplify your voice as medical professionals, as the wonderful folks wearing those white coats, and why your voice is such a vital voice, really, in this whole fight. So here's the agenda. Again, I'm Vanessa. You're going to be hearing from my colleagues listed on the screen. We're going to run through who is Planned Parenthood. I think oftentimes people have one idea of Planned Parenthood, and if you've used our services, we love that that is your interaction with our wonderful health centers. But we also have a wide range of positions that we do in terms of staff here at Planned Parenthood Federation of America and Planned Parenthood Action Fund. We are politically active. We do engage in public affairs. And of course, we are the largest provider of sex education in communities across the country. And we're going to talk a little bit about why partners such as yourself are so key to this. What is the lay of the land for reproductive health care? What does advocacy look like on the ground? What is that grassroots movement that we're really trying to strengthen and build? And how can organizations and individuals like yourself help change the media narrative? So first and foremost, like I said, my job is to not only infuse the Latino voice and perspective across the Federation in all of our work, but also to work with amazing organizations to achieve some of the numbers that you see on the screen. Recently, we had what we called a Pink Out around the country, and that was an opportunity for supporters to engage with us and show their support with our wonderful color and bright, vibrant pink, and to really help push back against the narrative that the unlawful and incorrect and malicious videos started, as well as the hits that Congress continues to take at Planned Parenthood and our funding. And you know what? We just said enough is enough. And so we really wanted to provide supporters a visual way to show their support. As you can see, we have some pretty impressive numbers, over 285 organizing events with partners in 48 states. And I will tell you that my amazing colleagues were able to pull this together, and this wasn't in a year, this wasn't even in 2 weeks' time, really. This was in about a week and a few days' time, and this shows the power of mobilization and the power of partnerships. We were able to offer 28 STD testing sites across the country, and that was free STD testing. And we saw families coming in together for the first time. Some people brought in their grandmothers. It was amazing. 18 anchor events, right, which included 500 people rally in New York City and 300 in Philly. And then, of course, you can see over 4,000 signups. We don't just keep it to what's happening in the States on the streets, obviously. We also take everything online. So we know that our lead hashtags for that day really kept trending. They were the top 3 nationally on Twitter, 7th globally. Over 262,000 people pinked out their profile pic. I'm sure many of you saw, and hopefully some of you did, pink out your profile pic on Facebook. Hard to say. And over 90,000 pinked out their profile pic on Twitter. And I know for a fact that my Facebook page was covered in pink, and still often does on certain days. So we really appreciate it. But all of this, the point of all these wonderful numbers is that this does not happen alone. This is not just Planned Parenthood. This is amazing partners across the country. This is amazing national as well as grassroots, reproductive justice partners, women's organizations, medical organizations, student organizations, you name it. We had amazing support because people really do understand what an attack on Planned Parenthood means, and that really we're the first. So if we fall, we know that there is a danger to many who also provide the service, but don't necessarily have the privilege and luxury of having such a large reach and brand. So there you go. We are Planned Parenthood. These are some awesome pictures of our rally here in Washington, D.C. with members of Congress, as well as the amazing 500-person rally that we had in New York City. There's our former board chair, Alexis McGill-Johnson, loving it. So a little bit more 101, right? Again, people think differently of what Planned Parenthood provides, but these are the numbers. Counseling and contraception to 2.1 million patients, more than 1.1 million pregnancy tests. These are amazing numbers, nearly 4.5 million tests and treatments for STIs, including 700,000 HIV tests. So when you read in the newspaper about states who are attempting to kill HIV funding for Planned Parenthood, you can see how big that impact really is. We have 1.4 million emergency contraceptive kits, and obviously, like I said, we are the largest sex ed provider in the country, with our programs reaching more than 1.5 million. I will also say that we know that these numbers are larger. These numbers were taken about a year ago from our census, and so that has continued to grow as we also have been seeing a report in interest in people working in public affairs and more people coming into our health centers. So I want to talk a little bit in a real-life example of how amazing partners are. Planned Parenthood knew that we had a role to play in the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. We just weren't really sure what that role was, but we knew that we wanted to support it. So we started supporting the ACA since its inception and started pushing and lobbying for it on Capitol Hill as well. Within that, we knew that we didn't want to lose our unique voice. We definitely, women have unique needs. Women turn to Planned Parenthood for care for the reproductive health that we provide. And so all of our materials spoke to that audience in English and Spanish. And we're very proud of our ACA campaign, and we've been able to enroll hundreds of thousands of people across the country in ACA, or at least provide education material and then help them with enrollments. We were, again, obviously not able to do this alone. So we sat in a coalition with people and different organizations across the country, including those in constituency-based organizations such as National Council La Raza, LULAC, Sister Song, and a few others, to really sit down and figure out how can we promote the ACA to our communities who need it the most. And obviously we worked with Enroll America, who is the lead on ACA. We made sure that people knew through our partners and provided the language for our partners that women do have unique needs and that they do have unique considerations when it comes to picking a health care plan. Some of those things include, how much does my birth control cost with this? Will I have to go to the doctor? Well, how much does that mean, as well as concerns with their family? So in Planned Parenthood's unique voice, we decided, you know what, that's where we're going to head. So we made sure to not only fight, but also make sure that everyone who came to us to sign up for the ACA and our partners knew that birth control is without a copay now. Thank you, Obamacare. That preventive services without copays such as essential health benefits, which many women that we saw had actually never had before. And so this was the first time for many's interaction with medical professionals. Direct access to OBGYN, young parents can stay on their parents' health insurance until age 26, and women can no longer be discriminated against, higher premiums, and pre-existing conditions. And so again, so there are many benefits to the ACA. We wanted to, again, make sure that we were speaking to the unique needs of women as well as our unique services. What that equated to was not only additional education for the partners that we worked with on this campaign, but being able to really spread our reach to folks who may have had some preconceived notions of Planned Parenthood, may have only thought that we only provide abortion services, don't really know us for much other things. And so it was an amazing opportunity to not only provide that education and expand our reach, but make sure that people who needed it got the care that they needed. And of course, as you can see, we start using all of this and work with our partners. We have brick and mortars in 50 states across the country, and we started to create a program that really leaned on that existing footprint. Planned Parenthood Health Center staff, as well as volunteers and supporters, came together with other organizations at our health centers as sites many times for enrollment. They all went and knocked doors together. They held various rallies together, and of course, they were in the digital process. What this also led to is allowing Planned Parenthood staff in the states to realize about all the other issues of intersection. And so we've seen from this Planned Parenthood being more out front when it comes to issues of immigration, when it comes to issues of racial justice, when it comes to issues of wage and gender gap, because we're able to really partner with folks. And again, through that process, we're also able to provide education to the folks who would come to us first. And here's a bit more numbers. I know that this webinar will be available online for you, so I don't want to continue to read through the numbers. But as you can see, they're pretty impressive. We're really proud of the work that we've been able to do. They enrolled nearly 10,000 consumers, and most of them by certified enrollment assisters. We also work closely in the ACA campaign with navigators, which again come from partner organizations and not Planned Parenthood directly. So we really know the value of partnering with folks such as yourself and others, and we really were excited that the ACA was such a key moment for this organization to expand its reach, provide access to care, as well as really break down some of those silos when you talk about issues in a woman's life and her family's life to be able to move forward and work with. And then there we go. After Healthcare Act, sharp drop in spending on birth control. And the latest numbers we've seen have been that women have saved over $1.4 billion on birth control. So this is fantastic news, and there's some of our young people celebrating. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Erica to introduce herself briefly and take us through why is your voice so important and how you might be able to use your unique voice to help push the fight for women's reproductive health forward. So Erica?
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you for going over those numbers. It's always really fantastic to see everything play out in impact and the difference it means for women's lives. And so I am Erica Sacken. I am our Director of Political Communications for Planned Parenthood, and I am here to talk to you all today about how you can make a difference when we're talking about the fight to protect reproductive health and reproductive rights, and the fight to protect basic access to health care and medical research. So first, why is your voice important? I'm sure you've seen press around Planned Parenthood. I'm sure you've seen statements or Cecile Richard appear on the media, and she is definitely an amazing spokesperson. But especially when we're dealing with the kind of attacks we've seen over the past 6 months and longer, we know that we need more than just Planned Parenthood to stand up. And when Vanessa went over kind of the Pink Out Day numbers, that definitely shows the strength of grassroots supporters.
But in addition, we know something that really, really, really resonates with people and resonates especially with lawmakers are the voices of people from the medical community. And so I'm sharing today on the slide you see an example editorial that was informed by medical voices, but there's more, too many examples to share. Vanessa made me take out some slides. Because it was really incredible, the outpouring of medical voices that we saw in the aftermath of the attacks, everything from bringing up good science to talking about the essential role that Planned Parenthood plays as a healthcare provider. So why is your voice important? One, because you're not Planned Parenthood. So while Planned Parenthood is being attacked, of course we're going to fight back, and we can say the most sensible, emotive and, you know, kind of impactful things. And at the end of the day, we're still Planned Parenthood, and as we're fighting over whether or not to defund Planned Parenthood, it's always going to be kind of a no-duh moment that Planned Parenthood is responding to attacks. But when members of the medical community also speak out, it becomes more about just Planned Parenthood defending the care that they continue to provide. It becomes other folks saying, no, this is important, and no, this care is essential, and it's not true that, you know, other community health centers can absorb the patients treated by Planned Parenthood, which is something we've seen in academic study after academic study. So I think having those voices from the medical community help provide that kind of third-party outsider point of view that helps validate everything that we've also been saying. The other reason is because you guys have a unique perspective. You are medical providers, and while we're also obviously a healthcare provider, you're people who are in this field, who are studying and can talk about medical research and can talk about best practices. And that's incredibly important to add to this conversation, especially when we see political attacks that very often have no basis in science. And so being that voice of reason is incredibly important. And adds such a valuable piece to this conversation. And third, I think because you all have your own stories that you can share. And what we know in these fights is that, as Vanessa talked about, one of the reasons why these political attacks tend to not be effective and tend to be thwarted is because so many people across the country, Planned Parenthood is not a political talking point. Planned Parenthood is their healthcare provider, and Planned Parenthood is where they went for their first birth control or where they went for their first well woman exam. And sharing those stories, whether it was as a provider or as a patient or as somebody who had worked with a Planned Parenthood healthcare center, those unique personal stories help get us beyond political rhetoric and into what are we really talking about and whose lives we're really talking about. And those are the things that tend to be most impactful. So now we're going to go to how you can share your voice and how you can add your voice to the conversation. So there are a bunch of different ways. As somebody coming from the medical community, I would say a few really easy ones are opinion pieces and letters to the editor. Those are ones you can do on your own, although I will add that we at Planned Parenthood, especially in the communications department, are always happy to work with people who want to submit a letter to the editor, an opinion piece, or even are working on a academic piece or a piece for a journal that wants to touch on Planned Parenthood. We are always happy to work with you and have lots of folks who are happy to talk through ideas and talk through kind of other facts and kind of collections of information that we may already have on hand. But so these are great because they allow you, as we always say, to tell your own narrative. Unlike talking with a reporter, which we'll get to in a second, these allow you to tell your full story. So a letter to the editor is great because if you ever have been reading the newspaper or watching TV and see something, a story that you think is wrong or makes you mad, a letter to the editor is a great way to add your voice to the conversation and correct things that you may have seen that you think are wrong. And so we highly encourage you to submit those, and I'm happy to talk you through in more detail on kind of the basic standards. They're actually fairly easy to submit. And you have a high probability of having your piece run, at least as a letter to the editor, if you add your credentials in, because I think your voice is probably going to be one they may not often get submitted. same thing with opinion pieces. These can be op-eds. Op-eds take a little bit more skill. They're generally kind of like if you've ever had to write an essay, they should start out always with one clear thesis that you're trying to say. I think this is the thing that we always talk through with people, and that can be kind of the most confusing, just because there are some times when you want to go in and say everything under the sun. But the key is to pick one clear point that you want to make, and just really think about what's the main thing you're trying to say there. Have that be your thesis, and then write kind of tying it to something recently in the news. Make 3 points that back up kind of how you prove your thesis. Talk about why you have a unique perspective on this, and then end with your thesis again. And these can be great. These can be your local paper. You can always try to submit these to a big national paper, although they tend to have a higher bar. And they can also be for if you see any local news websites. Sometimes local TV stations have online opinion pieces that they'll run. MSNBC has some great ones, as does CNN. And also if there are school papers or any other, there are lots of places to run these pieces. And I think anytime you've seen something run in print and said, oh, I could probably do that, the answer is you probably could. And we're always happy to help you, but I encourage you to submit that as well. The next piece is talking with reporters. So this can be a little trickier because, as I mentioned, you have less control over the final story. But I would encourage you to do it, and I would actually encourage you to do it in conjunction with your local Planned Parenthood or with another organization that has skill at doing this. There are actually very learnable skills in how to best navigate a conversation with a reporter, and it mainly involves planning out what you're going to want to say ahead of time and some really easy tips and tricks to make sure that you end up saying what you want to say and end up having the quote in the story be what you wanted instead of what you accidentally let slip out. But again, that is incredibly valuable because I think, again, oftentimes reporters will do he said, she said stories, so they'll talk to someone from Planned Parenthood and they'll talk to someone who opposes Planned Parenthood. And then as somebody with the medical community, I think you, again, add that unique perspective that can really help shape the way that the story reads. Speaking at events and visibility events, this is kind of, as Vanessa mentioned, that showing up in your white coat. This is where it becomes so essential that we talk about showing that the medical community stands with Planned Parenthood. And so that's, again, I think either organizing in a local chapter or working with the local Planned Parenthood affiliate. If they're having a press conference, if they're having a rally, if they're having an event where they're having a lot of speakers, your voice can be incredibly important. And then finally, social media. I don't know how many of you all are on Twitter, but that has become such an important place to share your public opinions. And to really add your voice in a conversation in a way that I think wasn't possible even 5-10 years ago. So that can be really, really, really effective both in terms of tweeting generally if you have opinions. The same rules apply because you have such a unique perspective. I think you can really add in a valuable opinion to the conversation. But also, they can act as kind of mini letters to the editor. So if you're watching a TV show or, the news or read something in the paper and disagree with it or agree with it and want to drop them a note but don't have time to do a letter to the editor or want to do something in addition to a letter to the editor, you can tweet at the TV station, at the radio station, at the paper, at the reporter. I would never harass somebody, but reporters actually read their tweets, and it can oftentimes have more influence over what they're reading and what they're saying and where they're getting their information than kind of more traditional routes. And so finally, things to remember as you're engaging in public conversation about this. We have kind of 3 kind of rules of engagement or best practices tips. The first one would be always be the reasonable one. That should be a no-brainer, right? But I think in especially this fight, we're going to come up against people who, again, may not be making arguments based on facts, who may not have much consideration for the truth or for facts or for medical information at all. We oftentimes here at Planned Parenthood see states introducing laws that have very little to do with accurate medical information. And it can be really easy to get frustrated. But at the end of the day, as long as you remain the reasonable one, people will actually hear you better. And the more you remain reasonable and the more you remain calm and the more you remain kind of collected, the more it actually emphasizes how much folks arguing against this stuff oftentimes are not reasonable. So in the end, it's helpful, even if it can be difficult or frustrating. Again, come from the healthcare angle. One thing we always talk to people when we're preparing them to go talk with the media is that you're speaking as you. You never need to think of yourself as speaking as a Planned Parenthood spokesperson. You should never think of yourself as having to engage in policy or political discussions that you may not feel prepared for. And in fact, your voice is most effective when you're talking as yourself, your own story, your own work, your own studies, and your own experience. And that's actually going to be the best way to approach this. And it can also get you out of answering tricky questions that you may not know. Because you may not be talking with us every day, right? So if you get asked about Planned Parenthood's position on XYZ, you can always say, you know what, I'm not a spokesperson for Planned Parenthood, but I am, you know, a person with these credentials, and the thing that I really care about today, or the thing I really want to talk about today, is why it's so important that we continue to make sure people have access to reproductive health care, or whatever it is you're there to talk about. And then the final piece is don't fight with the head, fight with the heart. And so that comes from a lot of times, I think, when we're engaging in these conversations, it can be very tempting to feel like, well, if I just have the most logical answer, that will make the most sense. And what we have found over and over again, if anyone has ever watched pundits and gotten frustrated, is that that is not true. Human beings, because of who we are, we tend to, if we hear a list of facts or if we hear a list of very reasonable arguments, we will tend to tune them out. And instead, the way that we all absorb information the best is going to be through stories. And they're going to be through things that we can emphasize with, and they're going to be through kind of cause and effect statements, right? So very quick, simple. This is, if you pay attention, sometimes you can even see why someone like Donald Trump is so effective, right? Because even though sometimes what he's saying doesn't logically make sense, he explains it almost like he's talking to a kindergarten classroom, right? He says, this is what is true, and this is why this is the other thing that's true. You want to vote for me because I wrote The Art of the Deal. And even though that doesn't make any sense, because of the way he explains it, it feels reasonable when you listen to it. It can be a very intoxicating way of talking. Not that I'm advocating for anyone to support Donald Trump, but I think that there are a lot of lessons to learn from somebody as an effective communicator. And so I would say the lessons to learn from that are going to be, don't just say this study has shown X, Y, Z, this study has shown X, Y, Z. I think say it as a cause and effect statement, right? Say, we know that we all want women to be healthy. And what we've seen is that when you let women have access to Planned Parenthood, they're going to be healthier than not. And kind of other cause and effect pieces. That's also why we always encourage people to tell your story, because I think as you can tell your story very simply and almost in that parable format, right? So I started in X place, and then I discovered Y, and that's how I ended up at Z. And this is the lesson that I learned. Using that to talk about why you're involved in healthcare or why you think Planned Parenthood is important, or even using your own personal story to talk about why you think a piece of legislation is a bad bill, is going to be a really effective way of communicating, and is going to resonate oftentimes much better than just listing the facts. That's not to say don't use facts. I think using one or two interspersed, very clear and very quick and very easy to understand factoids is always going to be a helpful way to communicate, but what we call that is frosting. So you never want your full argument to be just those factoids. You want them to be the icing on the cake that helps make the point that you already made with your personal story. So that's it. The final thing I'll say is that we are always here as a resource. You should always, always, always feel free to reach out to Planned Parenthood directly, especially if you're thinking about doing media or thinking about engaging with a reporter or submitting an op-ed or letter to the editor. We're always happy to help. So thank you again. Back over to you, Vanessa.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. That was fantastic. Some really good nuggets there. And again, I really want to reiterate that we are always here to help. We have talking points galore. We have specific areas where we need your voice, and so we're always happy to help. But regardless, if something moves you, you should feel free. Send that tweet, write that op-ed, and your voice, again, as a medical professional is so important and vital to this fight. So now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to introduce herself and then take us through the lay of the land. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Sussman. I'm the Director of State Policy and Advocacy here at Planned Parenthood. And a lot of my work focuses on state legislative activity, which oftentimes focuses on the abortion fights and attempts to restrict access to Planned Parenthood healthcare centers. So I'm going to talk us through kind of an overview of what we've seen over the past couple of years and then get more specifically into what we expect to see in 2016 in the state legislatures. So in 2010, there was really a kind of changeover in many states electorally regarding the balance of power in many state legislatures. So when those state legislatures convened in 2011, they really pushed through a tremendous number of particularly abortion restrictions. As you'll see on the slide, in 2011, the numbers were extremely high, and then from 2011 through 2015, they passed 288 restrictions altogether, which frankly is more than, in the past 20 years combined. So there has been a concerted effort to push through bills that really gut Roe and get at the heart of whether or not a woman actually has the ability to access abortion altogether. The one other note I'll make about these restrictions is while you're seeing in 2013 and 2015 those numbers go down, they're still, tremendously high compared to, the past 20 years. But a lot of what we've seen in the legislation is attempts to push bills that really get at the heart of whether or not abortion can be provided altogether. So we've moved away from some of the less restrictive bills that frankly require us to perhaps say something to a woman or that put up some barriers, and moved into bills that actually at their core really put into question whether or not Planned Parenthood and other healthcare providers' doors can even stay open. And so while those numbers have gone down, those bills are oftentimes quite insidious and have high impact in terms of patient care. Another point, not to depress you all, but since 2000, now looking at 2015, the number of states hostile to abortion across the country has doubled. And what that has meant is that in more states across the country, access to abortion has gone down for many women of reproductive age. But that also, when we're fighting these issues, we're fighting them in a lot more places. That takes a tremendous amount of resources, and it really requires us and hopefully you guys to band together, to stand up, and to fight back in ways that we haven't before. I will say of note, just for all of you, we really have found that the provider and doctor voice is crucial to these fights. In most of the research and messaging research we've done, doctors and healthcare providers always come out as one of the top messengers against these types of restrictions. And frankly, we have seen organizations, provider organizations, and organizations that represent doctors and other healthcare providers more and more aggressively push back on these efforts because, more broadly speaking, they really speak to a larger effort of inserting the government into the doctor-patient relationship. And so your voice is key. So in 2015, we saw some efforts to pursue TRAP regulations. This is targeted regulation of abortion providers. In this context here, we saw efforts to require doctors to have admitting privileges at a local hospital or require health centers that provide abortion to build out ambulatory surgical centers. This is an issue we've seen over the past couple of years and an issue I'm going to highlight towards the end of the presentation when I talk about current case before the U.S. Supreme Court. We've also seen a new effort over the past couple of years to push waiting periods, and these are expanded waiting periods. So, for example, over years, we have seen many states adopt 24-hour waiting periods, a requirement before obtaining an abortion, and just recently in North Carolina and Oklahoma, we've seen those numbers jump to 72 hours. So as you can imagine, that can create a huge burden for patients and for providers in terms of providing care. Several of those laws are pending in court right now, but the reality is I think in 2016 we will continue to see efforts to expand 72-hour waiting periods in other states. Sometimes those 72-hour waiting period laws also require 2 trips to the clinic, which, as you can imagine, for many women would be a tremendous burden, both financially and just in terms of taking off of time from work and, you know, dealing with actual life issues. Excuse me. Another issue I want to highlight that I think while it has been focused on Planned Parenthood is really kind of emblematic of the larger effort to push abortion restrictions in the state is after the recent video attacks around fetal tissue is to use those videos as a proxy for going in and investigating Planned Parenthood and our practices with the attempt to either shut down our health centers or use those investigations as grounding for a reason why certain legislation needs to be passed. And so while many of the investigations have come to a conclusion or we have been cleared, there are still many states where the investigations are open and where both administrations and legislative bodies are using it to pursue either defunding Planned Parenthood or legislation around fetal tissue specifically. So this highlights, since the video release in July, the efforts to restrict access to patient care by eliminating Planned Parenthood from publicly funded programs that reimburse for the health care that we provide. This is an active issue. We believe it will continue to be active in the states in 2016. We've also seen it very active at the federal level with congressional efforts to defund Planned Parenthood. And while oftentimes the programs, for example, like Medicaid, where they're trying to kick us out of, or Title X, where funding doesn't pay for abortion in the first place, they really are kind of conflating the fight between these videos and between our funding. And one of the things that we have done, I think successfully and lifted up, is highlighting that this attack on Planned Parenthood is truly an attack on our patients. It's an attack on healthcare providers who provide this sort of care, and really just personifies our opposition's goal of shutting our doors and eliminating access to abortion care altogether. So trends in 2016, I think we'll continue to see investigations into Planned Parenthood, defunding, regulation regarding fetal tissue, method bans or bans particularly on the D&E procedure, waiting period extensions, admitting privileges, and religious refusal laws. These are going to happen all across the country. You know, by the time we hit March, we will likely see hundreds of bills pending around these issues. And it is going to be kind of a tough fight. And again, not to belabor it, but I think medical provider voice is key to us fighting and pushing back on these type of restrictions. So then I'm just going to quickly close out with the Supreme Court term, which I think is a very kind of powerful and integral overlay to the 2016 state legislative sessions. So in particular, Whole Women's Health versus Cole, which is the case challenging House Bill 2 out of Texas. You know, most of you will probably recognize the famous kind of Wendy Davis filibuster. So this is actually that bill. It has finally reached the Supreme Court. It is a case being brought by the Center for Reproductive Rights. And this case really puts before the court questions around access to abortion that, frankly, we have not seen before the court in 20 years. So this is a significant moment in time, and the decision that comes out could really impact access to abortion for future generations to come. So the law really, at its core, kind of asks the court to determine what an undue burden is in terms of a woman accessing abortion. As you can see our chart here, it shows you after House Bill 2, you know, going from 40-some health centers that provide abortion, maybe even more, down to, you know, a much smaller number with whole regions in the area completely having no access at all. And so this has kind of always been this looming question, which is, geez, like how many laws have to be passed, how many barriers have to be put out there before it's actually an undue burden for a woman to access abortion? And so this question really is before the court. And while there is hope that the decision comes out in a positive way, there is certainly a chance that that it won't. So 2 notes on this, and then I'm going to pass it back to Vanessa. The case will be heard in the beginning of March, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity for folks like yourselves to kind of engage in advocacy around the court hearing the case. And then the decision likely won't come out until the end of June. And I do believe in May and June there will be other opportunities and advocacy that can be done around the case, connecting the dots between this case and, frankly, the efforts over the past 4 or 5 years to just eliminate access for women across the country to abortion services. So thanks for your time, and we look forward to working closely with you. I'm going to kick it back to Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. And that is sad and a bit depressing, but informative. And now we know what our battles are and how we're going to fight them. Katie's about to tell us. I hope you are fired up and upset and ready to go, as our president likes to say, who has also been an amazing champion for Planned Parenthood and the ACA. So very thankful for him as well. I'm going to kick it over to Katie to introduce herself and tell us how you can channel all this energy to fight back.
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Waters. I'm the Organizing Operations Coordinator at Planned Parenthood Action Fund. What a great introduction, Vanessa. Thank you so much. I want to talk to you about, you know, there are these really terrible things happening in legislatures across the country, but we are organizing to win. So our organization exists to provide the healthcare families need in order to reach their fullest potential. That's what our mission is really about. In public affairs and organizing, we seek to protect women's health access by building enough power to win policies at the state and federal level that will protect families and expand access, as well as elect legislatures that are friendly to our issues. So how do we do that? Planned Parenthood, like you've heard on this call, is a really interesting organization. We have brick and mortar health centers all across the nation. We also are the largest provider of sex education in the nation, and we also have over 7 million supporters nationwide. So our power comes from the people, so our patients, the people who believe in our mission, resources such as raising and investing money to support our policy and electoral goals, and also our brand. We need to leverage our well-respected brand to influence elected officials, candidates, media, and people who are making decisions about our access to health care. We're importantly organizing a powerful and enduring army of people who take action when these terrible bills come up in legislatures. So I want to talk a little bit about our movement potential here as well. Again, this has been touched on multiple times already, but we are a very interesting organization because we have that clinic infrastructure. People's lives really have been changed by Planned Parenthood. I know that when my mom was pregnant with me, she went to Planned Parenthood. She was new to Washington State, and she didn't have a primary care physician, but she knew that she could trust Planned Parenthood in a new state to give her a referral. So we have people across the country. That story isn't unique to my family. We serve millions of patients every year. We also have a young and diverse client base, and this client base is representative of the rising American electorate. So we're building power, looking forward to elections that will occur in 2020. We're obviously deeply invested in this presidential election that's coming up as well. Again, we have a trusted brand, which actually leads to, I would say not potential, but it is actually happening, deep commitment to Planned Parenthood and folks in our communities volunteering to continue that work. And of course, as Vanessa spoke about earlier, building roots in the community, our community partners are essential for us to continue providing the care that we've been providing for 100 years. So what does that mean? We need you. We need you now more than ever. We need you to get involved in this powerful movement and help make an impact. We recognize the amazing work that you're doing inside the exam room, and we hope that you'll bring your talents to the Planned Parenthood advocacy world as well. There are plenty of ways to get involved. Again, as you've heard, telling your story, especially with your credentials, is one of the easiest ways that you can get involved. There are multiple ways that you can tell your story that Erica touched on earlier. You can also share your story with Planned Parenthood by clicking on this on the link that's in the PowerPoint, bit.ly/pp story. That is all case sensitive. So share your story with us. Someone will reach out to you to talk to you about your story. You can also host an organizing meeting with other medical students. Get together with your community, and you can also connect with your local affiliate to see how you can support the work that they're already planning. Also, post on social media, again, something that Erica already stated. I also think just following our Twitter and our Facebook so that you can see what we're up to is a powerful way to make a statement. If you do want to post on social media, you can mention us in your tweet, and you can also use the hashtag #ActNoMatterWhat, both on Facebook and Twitter. To connect with your local affiliate, I want to direct you to Erin Carhart, who manages our youth program. She works really closely with students. She is a badass organizer. I highly recommend reaching out to her to get connected. And that's all I have, so I'm going to pass it back over to Vanessa. I just want to say thank you for the incredible work that you're doing.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. There are tons of ways, as you just heard from Katie, on how to get involved. And really, because we know that you all have such hectic schedules and lives and do not work the traditional 9 to 5, we really have several ways to make sure that you feel like you're contributing, that you're involved in whatever way is easiest for you and whatever way fits your lifestyle. So if you want to rally on a Saturday, we'll have a rally on a Saturday. If social media is the easiest way for you, then please feel free to do that and make sure to hit us at PPAC. And then, of course, if you need to get that out and write some letters to your local elected officials or folks who are railing against Planned Parenthood, or on the flip side, in a more positive message, if you have a great experience with Planned Parenthood, if someone in your family has used Planned Parenthood Health Centers and has a great experience, that is the piece of work that we really don't hear until we're on the defense. And so we're trying to do our best to also push back, highlight the positive stories. So please feel free to lift that up. I think everyone has really, I hope, hit home that you all have such a unique perspective and a unique and valued voice in this as medical providers. And so we really welcome the opportunity to work with you in whatever way is conducive for you. So we are at time. It is an hour on the dot for us. Again, to the leadership of AMSA, thank you so much. Thank you to anyone who is able to stay on for a full hour for this webinar. We hope that you found it helpful. We hope that we have provided some outlets as well as some education for you on who and what Planned Parenthood is. And again, thank you so much for your partnership. We really do appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.